One of the other things we're going to do to the Farmall tractor here is we're going to rebuild the carburetor. It's right under here. So there's just a couple things to take off. We got our choke there, and we got a fuel line back in there. I don't know if you can see it. And we got a throttle that's back, that goes back in behind. It comes off the governor there. And then we'll have to unbolt that tube up there. And then those right there to unbolt the carburetor. And then this is our air intake right here. So we're gonna try to pull that off. I got a carburetor kit. See if we can get that rebuilt. It's gonna be really hard for you guys to see me taking it off because of the loader being in the way. So once I get it off there, we'll get it on the workbench and show you. Okay, so we have the carburetor off the Farmall. We're gonna take, I already took some of the fittings out of it here. There's one for the idle here. There's one for the air mixture screw down here, and I took the bottom one out here for the float. And then this is the fuel mixture, but we're gonna tear this apart. It's absolutely filthy, and the tractor was running. It wasn't a problem, but it was not running well. It was sputtering. I guarantee that this has probably had fuel sitting in it for years. The tractor sat for a while, so I'm sure there's crud down in the bottom of it. If not, it's had ethanol fuel sitting in there. It's probably got some moisture in it, I'm guessing. So we're going to take it apart, and we're going to see what's inside of it. And I got a rebuild kit for the carburetor laying somewhere here. I'm going to try to find it. It's over by the door. So there's the carburetor kit. I think I got that at Rural King. It's just their standard carburetor kit for this. I don't know if it's actually any good or not. The one at Napa, they were able to get the one at Napa, but they wanted me to pay shipping on it. The carburetor kit itself was 17 bucks. Their shipping was like 12. I decided that I was going to try this one and see if that one's going to work for us. I don't know the difference in the quality anymore. I know Napa's been raising prices and their quality's been going down. So I'm going to try the one from Rural King, and we'll see how it does. So that hasn't been apart in a while. All right. Ew, look at that. Look at that. I don't know if you can see it in the video. Maybe not. Here, I'll wipe my finger through there. That is nasty down in there. That's the bowl where the fuel sits.
That is gross.
So, gaskets don't look horrible in here, but I'm going to ruin them getting them off of there. So, looks like we've got the right gasket kit to go with it. Yeah. So we'll take some of that stuff off of there. I'm definitely going to pull the float and the needle and seat out of here. And we'll look at this throttle butterfly and check that out. We're going to get everything cleaned up on it, all the holes blown out here. Make sure everything's in good shape. We'll clean everything out because this thing is filthy. I'm surprised it was running as well as it was. But our carburetor kit includes gaskets in here. We've got a needle and seat in here. There's gasket. This is the gasket for the top part of it. And then we've got a new needle and seat in there with some little O-rings. And I think there's actually a brand new butterfly shaft in there. If that's worn as well, we'll check that. Let's see. It did not come with another float. I'm hoping our float's fine. But there is a service instructions in here that talk about the carburetor and all the pieces. Disassemble it, reassemble it. we'll read through all that, and then it shows the primary adjustments here: throttle stop screw, and how many turns off the seat for the starting initial startup. So that's great. We'll start getting parts cleaned up here. Okay, I've got stuff soaking in here right now, but we got the carb base all cleaned out. I took out pretty much everything that I could in there and cleaned that up the best I could. We took the little tube here, cleaned that up. We put a new gasket on it that came in the kit. For the upper half of the carburetor, we pulled this apart. This is your float. So we're going to pull that pin out here, get that out of there, and then that float will come off of here. We're going to set that aside. And then our needle and our seat are right here. So there's your needle. See if I can get it out of there. Needle and seat. We've got a new needle and seat that came with our carb kit. So we're going to put that in. And there's some gaskets probably underneath that we're going to do. So we're going to pull that stuff apart and replace anything that needs replaced. And obviously this thing is absolutely filthy. You can see all the crud that's in here. We're going to get that all cleaned up. And hopefully this thing runs a little better. Okay, so we are ready to reassemble the carb. We've got everything cleaned up real well. And so we're going to start with the seat. We're going to make sure we got a gasket on there. Correct gasket in place. We're going to put it back in. And then our new needle can go into that. I'm just going to snug that a little bit. Okay. So then our new needle goes face down in that and sits like that. And then we're going to put our float back on. And the float goes with this tab down and sits like that. They did give us a new pin to go through here. I don't know if this pin is better or worse than the other one. It might actually be better. Maybe not. Let's see if we can get it to... There it goes. Okay. So what was the measurement here? So we have to set the level of this float. So to obtain the correct fuel level, check the position of the float to measure 1 5/16 plus or minus 3/64 from the casting to the farthest point of the float. So from the casting here up to there should be 1 5/16. So from the casting up to the farthest point of the float. So I'm going to go right there, go down right to about there. We're at 1 1/4. So we need to be at 1 5/16. So 1 5/16 is a little less than that. We're real close. There's 1 5/16. It needs to come up just a little bit. So what does it say to come up? Bend the float arm next to the float to obtain this measurement. Do not bend the float hinge. So don't bend the hinge here. Bend the arm on the float to obtain that. I'm going to come around the other side and see. Is this side, because this side actually looks a little higher. Yeah, that side's real close there. I don't know if we can see that on the camera or not, but So that's like 1 9/16. So that's too high over here as well. So we're going to bend these down just a little bit. We'll recheck that. Okay, so that's a little lower there. So now we're at 1 and we're at 1 5/16 now. I don't know if you can see that on there. We're right at 1 5/16 on this side. This side's a little sticking up a little bit more, so I'm going to adjust this a little more. We'll check this one. That one's right at it now too. That should be good for our float. So at this point, we're going to put our center tube piece back in here. We've got a large gasket that's going to go on here. Make sure that's centered up nice. And the holes are in the right spots on that. Actually, I think it should be flipped the other way. That's better. Okay. And then our carb can go back together here. So we got to make sure that all this lines up. There's a little fitting here. We blew air through all these holes everywhere to make sure all of this was cleaned out and there's nothing, no gunk stuck in any of the holes or anything like that. Do we need to get this jet in first?
Yeah.
I think this jet goes down through this way, through the center there, and then on the bottom we put new gaskets on both of these. So, and then that jet threads in to there. So I'd like to get that on there first because that's going to be nearly impossible to get it in place once it's in there. So, and that needs to actually seal, so we'll snug that up. There we go. So that will seal there. Got our jet in place. So then this is going to go back together like this. Make sure our gasket's in place and centered up there. Once it is, we're going to flip the whole unit back over. We'll grab our bolts. Start those back in. Now I opted not to replace the throttle shaft for the butterfly on this. This one's good and tight in here. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to start tearing everything apart on there. It did come with extra screws to put it in. Everything in there still looks good. A lot of these old carburetors, the major components in there, as long as they're not worn badly, aren't ever a problem. So I decided that this one doesn't need it. If we put it back together and we have issues with it, I'll tear it back apart. But it was running decent before. I just wanted to get all the gunk out of the carb, so I don't think that's going to be an issue for us. But I did make sure that that butterfly works nice and free, moves easily before we put this back together. So then once we get these in place, we're going to put some of our metering jets back into it, or I'm sorry, the metering screws back into it, and adjust those. And it says it on the kit what turns it is, and that's really, really important that you follow the directions on that sheet that's in there, because those settings are the initial settings to get this thing up and running to where you can fine tune it then. And if you can't get it to run right away, you can't really get it tuned properly because it has to be running to tune it. So these are our initial settings on it. And I can still hear that float moving around in there. That's a good sign. Okay, so if I come back to this, we've got a few parts here. This is just the fuel petcock that goes back in the bottom. That's no big deal. That just threads in there. This is what you open up to let the fuel out of the bowl. This one right here is the mixture metering that goes. This actually threads down into that needle this needle goes down into the seat that was down in there. So we're going to start putting that in. We also have the two up here. This one's for the air fuel mixture. And I believe that's the idle air fuel mixture up here. And then this one is your idle itself. This one has a flat end on it, and it threads into that hole. I probably should put a little bit of oil on those to get them started. I don't know about that one. There it goes. So what do we got on that sheet there? So set the throttle stop screw to 1.5 turns open. So this is the throttle stop here. You can see this is the throttle, and this is the stop for it. So what you're going to want to do is run this. Ooh, there's some metal shavings on that screwdriver. I don't want them getting in here. So we're going to run this all the way in. This is the throttle stop. And all of these screws, you basically run them all the way in until they're seated. You don't want to over tighten them. You just want to snug them. So you can see this is coming through down in here. I don't know if you can see it on the video or not. It's actually coming through right there. And it's stopping this thing from coming back. And that's what stops your butterfly from moving. So we're going to run that all the way in and then back 1.5 turns. So there it's bottomed. So I'm going to go, there's half a turn, there's 1 turn, there's another half a turn. So that is your initial throttle stop setting right there. The next one is the fuel adjusting needle. And I believe that the fuel adjusting needle is the one down here. Let's look at the picture here. So it's saying that letter I on here, does it even tell what they are? Interesting. So on this it's showing that let's see what E is. What it's showing what E is. Does it say E on here? Idle adjusting screw is letter E. That's the one up here. So idle adjusting needle, 1 turn off the seat. So that's what they're saying this one is. And then the bottom one, they're saying the fuel adjusting needle, 3 turns off the seat. So we're going to take this all the way in. And these are just our initial settings. We may have to adjust it once we get it on there. So that's seated right there. We'll do 1 turn off seat there. And then this one, they said 3 turns off the seat. So we'll put this in all the way. Okay, it's seated there. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 turns off the seat right there. So that should be it then for the carburetor. We'll make sure to put a new gasket on the top of it when we go to install this back on. And when we go to put it back on, we got to make sure that that little groove right there lines up with our throttle that's coming through. This little groove right in there, you can see it, lines up to make sure that our throttle's in the right position. But other than that, that's it for our carburetor rebuild. So we'll go put it back on the tractor, see what happens. Okay, so I've got the carburetor put back on here. Everything's bolted back up. We got the fuel line back on it. I don't know if you can see there. Got the fuel line back on it. Our choke's back on it. We got our air tube back. We're checking down here to make sure there's no leaks. Looks good down there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open the fuel bowl here and get some fuel coming down the line to it. We'll give it a second or two as this bowl fills, and then we're going to check it with the petcock here and see that we get fresh fuel out of here. Yes, we do. All right, so that's the initial settings on this carb. We'll see if it'll fire up on that. We may have to do some fine tuning on it as we get it running here, but I'm going to go ahead and try to fire it up. We'll see if we can fire it up without the choke. We'll see what it does. Fired up nice without the choke. That should be about it for the carburetor. The only other thing I'll do is take it out and see if it'll work.